Hello and welcome to the AVForums Podcast for Monday the 24th of February, and joining me in this edition, Steve Withers.
What in Jupiter's balls?
Kaz Harlow.
It could be a disaster of epic proportions.
And Ed Selley.
Hey, you promised me a shitload of fish.
So have we all survived the weather? It's been one storm after another, and I was just saying to the guys, it's now heavy snow.
Well, for you.
Here this evening. Yes, I managed to just park the car up in time, and yeah, it started snowing.
It didn't do a sympathy oversteer. You know, at the very sense of there being snow above it, it didn't suddenly decide to get all slidey on you.
No, I've got to say this one, the older car was on P0s and it was terrible. This one, it's on Michelin's. Whoa, what a difference. It sticks to the road, absolutely. And I've got lots more tread than you have on your car, Ed. So
this is very, very true.
So it doesn't really go anywhere. But yeah, it's disaster weather-wise. Steve, what's it been like down your way? Has it been blowing your hair
Windy. Very windy where I live. I live on top of a hill, which is good news from a flooding perspective. But my God, the wind blows. It keeps blowing the gas fire out. That's how much wind's coming down the chimney.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, no, it's been very, very windy.
Does it have a cutout? If that happens?
Yeah, it does have a cutout. Don't worry, I'm not gassing myself. The gas flow immediately stops, I'm glad to say, because it's been blown out about 4 or 5 times in the last week. It's just been. You keep thinking like, well, it must have finished by now, this storm. No, a bit more.
Yeah.
I think it has now finished. It was sunny this afternoon.
It's been driving me. It's been driving me into the cinema room just so I can turn the sound up to drain out the noise of the wind on the side of the house. Yeah, absolutely.
Which midway last night and cranked it up for that very reason.
Ed?
Yes, well, I was down Steve's neck of the woods, as we'll cover in a bit. That was a blowy drive there and back. But it's just been rain and wind. It hasn't actually been very cold. It was about 12 degrees out there earlier on, down our way. As you point out, because my car goes back imminently, I'm on reduced tread. It's not. I'm at pains to stress the tyres are not illegal. I'm not a massive twat. Well, I am, but not in that regard. But yeah, I have much less tread than I would normally ever let my front tyres have, and there were points on the journey there and back where I did feel that a little bit. Conversely, when it's dry, it sticks like a limpet. So easy come, easy go. But it's more. Thankfully, as all my television aerials and satellite dishes have already been ruined by the first blowy bit. Thankfully, nothing else has gone amiss here. And I will say that when it's really blowy, it keeps the pigeons out of the tree in front of my house, so they don't shit on my car. So there is that. I mean, at some point, presumably the tree will also fall on my car. But until that time happens, actually, a bit of wind is not a bad thing in that regard. It keeps the birds out.
There you go, and the right type of fly birds, not the other type.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you do find adult women in your tree, that's a sign of very bad weather indeed, and you need to respond accordingly to that. So yes, no, I'm talking about bloody wood pigeons. I mean, I don't understand how so much crap comes out of a bird that size. I genuinely don't. On occasions, you come out and it's like your car's been shit on by a pterosaur.
Yeah, well, they're just rats with wings, aren't they? So
yes. Yeah. Although wood pigeons are edible rats with wings. Don't forget that. Okay. And if you live in an outside of actual urban areas, so you can see if they haven't exclusively been fed on a diet of KFC leftovers, they can actually be quite good eating, and they're legal to deal with as well. So there is that. Hey, I tell you what, come if you do some of the more if we go for some of the more adventurous post-Brexit settlements, it'll be useful to remember the status of wood pigeons. Trust me on that. They're good eating.
There you go. Kaz.
Yeah, surviving the storms like everyone else. I've got to say, this time round, this bout of storms has particularly had me questioning the state of our environment. I mean, I'm not saying we don't hear it all in the press all the time, but really, after 4 decades, I don't think I've remembered like a succession of storms being this bad. It's just weird.
Yeah. Well, come and live up my way, and you'll soon change your way of thinking. But
perhaps that's the point. Down south, it just doesn't happen that way. I mean, all of the fences have blown down in our neighbourhood. It just, they've been up there.
It's the end of the world. The fences are falling down.
It's a conspiracy about big fence. What you didn't see is the bloke loosening all the fittings prior to it happening. So he's got work for 4 to 5 months.
Yeah, and just saying before we're recording, and myself and Steve were going to come onto this. We were at Pinewood for the Panasonic launch, and I thought I was being really clever because red kites are very, very rare up Byway, and I thought, oh, there's one, and I was pointing it to Steve and telling. I must have seen about 20 of them in total that day, from going on the bus up to Pinewood and then coming out in a taxi and over to Heathrow. Must have seen 20 of them. Every time I looked up in the sky, there was a red kite. So we were saying there's some kind of conservation thing round about your way, Kaz.
Yeah, there's loads of red kites around here. It's yeah,
and that's
red
kite as in a bird, not a red kite that you fly when it's windy.
No, I don't have much luck
too.
with those.
No.
Not in this current weather conditions, you wouldn't.
You'd need a robust kite for that. So yeah.
There we go. Right, like I say, we're going to come on and talk about stuff that we've been up to because we don't have any hardware reviews this week because we've all been out of the house for a change.
It was most unsettling.
I thought that might be the case. So Ed's going to talk about the Bristol show just in a little bit, which you previewed last week. And myself and Steve are going to talk about Panasonic's launch. But before we do any of that, our competition master, Kaz, is going to take us through the competitions and the winners.
Okay, so current competitions. You can win a copy of the Peanut Butter Falcon on Blu-ray. It's recommended. 4th of March. Don't just get over the name. It's really good. You can win a copy of Sons of Denmark on Blu-ray. That's from Eureka. That's 4th of March as well. And also The Son of the Sheikh on Blu-ray. They like Sons at the moment at Eureka. That's 5th of March. You can get Gemini Man on Blu-ray, which will probably be good because you can't watch it at
24 frames a second, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So everyone who gets that should be pleased and thank themselves that they don't have the 4K. Maleficent Mistress of Evil on Blu-ray, that's 10th of March, it closes. Eureka's Raining in the Mountain on Blu-ray, that closes 10th of March. And Criterion's February titles on Blu-ray, and it's quite a good set. It's got Roma, from Alfonso Cuarón, Failsafe, which is Sidney Lumet, and it's also got the entire Essential Jack Demme collection, which I think has got 6 movies in it, just itself. So although it seems like 3 titles, it's actually 8. There's loads more competitions being open or added daily, so head over to avforums.com/competitions to enter even more. All competitions open to eligible AVForums members resident in the UK. Previous competition winners, we have Norville, who won a copy of The Courier on Blu-ray. Do apologise for that. Dave Mackin and RC Mackin won The Miracle Worker on Blu-ray. I don't think they're any relation. True HD won Cloak and Dagger on Blu-ray. Galadriel won Fellini's 8.5 on Blu-ray. And Habanero won Cujo on Blu-ray.
Excellent. So well done to our winners there. Lots of competitions for you to enter. And we'll be back in a sec with hardware news. Right, moving on to hardware news before we do. Mark's just turned up. So, Mark, everybody.
Yay!
Hey, Mark.
All right.
Hey, Mark.
We'll let you off the coat. You can do the end bit. Okay. All right. Okay. We haven't mentioned anything interesting. It was just pigeon shit and red kites and some other stuff. So you haven't missed much.
The standard fare.
Yep. Yeah. Standard AV Forums fare. Right. Myself and Steve are going to quickly go through this because we're not being disrespectful to Panasonic, but the TVs that they've launched for this year are very much the same as the TVs they launched last year in terms of OLED, with a few added features and one higher end feature moving down to the middle of the range. So basically they have announced at this moment in time there are 4 TVs coming, OLEDs. 3 have been announced. So we have the HZ1000, which is without the soundbar. Has most of the features that all the other TVs have. It has the same processor power, Dolby Atmos, Dolby Vision, HDR10 Plus. It also has Dolby Vision IQ and Filmmaker mode with intelligent sensing. The next model up is the HZ1500. Now, it has the Dolby Atmos upward-firing speaker that the GZ2000 had last year. So it moves down one model, and it has all the same features that we've just mentioned for the HZ1000. Like I say, there is another model coming out which we've been told about. It has been a little bit delayed, so it's a replacement for the GZ950. It's going to be the HZ980, and we know nothing about it at this moment in time because, like I say, they haven't actually finalised what that TV is going to be, but it will be in
Probably
the range.
guess, though.
Yeah, it'll be the same as the 950, but with Dolby Vision IQ and HDR10 Plus and Filmmaker mode. And again, we're not being disrespectful here because the TVs were absolutely cracking TVs last year, so why change it if it ain't broke? They've added a few extra features for this year. And the HZ1000, which we saw at CES, it was on display again here. Again, it's almost identical to the GZ2000, but it adds in Filmmaker mode with intelligent sensing and Dolby Vision IQ. So yeah, I mean, roughly the same as last year, but like we say, they were absolutely cracking TVs last year, so why change it if it ain't broke? The Pro panel comes back on the 2000 again this time around. They were talking about 20% brightness over other OLEDs and so on. That's not over the last year's 2000.
No, that's the same
that's
as
over last year's, yeah. So there's no improvement there actually in the brightness or anything else, but it does add in, the Dolby Vision IQ and Filmmaker mode with intelligent sensing. So Dolby Vision IQ, it's the first time Steve's seen it. It's the second time I've had a look. It was the same demo material that was being shown at CES being shown this time around. It was in a fairly light controlled room, although there was some light seepage coming into the room which may affect things a little bit. But Steve, first of all, you haven't seen it before. It works on metadata. So basically, It knows exactly what the picture should look like in a dim room, and all it does is apply that same data, but it's slightly raised for a brighter room.
Yes,
what did you think?
It did what I thought it would do. As the light increases in the room. Unfortunately, they were doing it in a really it was a huge mixing stage. So it was a pretty big room, and the guy actually had to stick his torch on his phone under the sensor in order to get it to actually change, because I don't think there was enough difference between dark and light otherwise in the room due to its size. But by applying light to the sensor and simulating a daytime experience, obviously the processing adjusted accordingly. So what it did was basically make darker scenes, brighter, bring out more detail on the darker parts of the image, so that obviously if you were looking at the same, there are two TV setups. One was just showing it in what would have been Dolby Vision Cinema mode, and obviously that looked quite dim and dark in a brightly lit room. The other TV adjusted its tone mapping accordingly, and then delivered more detail in the darker parts of the image and increased the brightness in the other parts of the image, so that it was a more watchable image. Basically, what it's doing is switching between this cinema home and cinema modes by using the light sensor, and essentially you could do it yourself if you just switch between the two modes. So it's not necessarily adding anything the TV can't already do if you've got an older TV and you're struggling to see something in a day, during daytime. Just switch to cinema home.
Yeah, but
you'll get basically the same effect.
The clever thing here is, though, that using the sensor, it's not what it's not doing. And we've seen these light sensors on TVs; they've been around since the days of plasma. These sensors, and if you switch them on, what they normally do is they normally just ramp everything up. So your blacks suddenly become grey, and the colours suddenly become oversaturated, and all the rest of it. It's not doing that. And I think this is where some of the confusion's coming in with these modes. It's not doing any of that. It's actually keeping blacks black, and it's keeping the dynamic range of the image intact. All it's doing is adjusting itself to the environment that you're in, and it's subtle. It's not a huge difference. And I think looking at the video, it looked more of a difference than actually when you're there by eye, because obviously the eye picks up more. So it's not a huge difference in terms of brightness, but it's effective when it comes to watching in a brighter room. And we always say you should watch it as it's intended to be seen, and that's in a dim room with the TV calibrated and so on. But let's face fact, I mean, even AVForums members, staunch AVForums members and readers and listeners, we don't all sit in rooms like that. We don't have the luxury of that. You have bright living rooms during the day. Even at night, you might have a few lights on, kids running about and all the rest. You can't take advantage of that. But what this mode does, and what Filmmaker mode with the intelligent sensing does, is it solves that problem. So it tries to remain as accurate as possible to what the creator intended, but it's doing it with a brighter image to suit the environment, so you're getting to see a bit more than you would in a normal Dolby Vision mode. Is that changing the creator's intent? Well, yes, it is, because it's adding in brightness, but it's trying to retain the colours and so on, and it has all the metadata there to say what the colours should be and what each scene should be. So if I was asked the question, well, would you accept this mode and would you recommend it to people, being the purist that I am, and I know that Steve is, yes, I would. Because I think it's an ideal solution to an actual problem that does exist. And the plus point is that you're still seeing things as close as possible to what the creator intended it to be. And I would much rather you watched it in that mode than switch it into vivid mode or dynamic mode or standard mode. You know what I mean? It's giving you a far better experience. So I think a lot of people have misunderstood these settings as something that we've seen in the past where it just ramps the brightness up. It doesn't do that. It's a lot more subtle. It's all very, very clever. And then we move on to filmmaker mode. Again, seems to be a lot of confusion about filmmaker mode, even from some AV journalists in the UK who review TVs. Just seem to completely not get this. They think it's some kind of film mode that has some special settings that's going to destroy their image and make it dull and all the rest of it. Basically, what filmmaker mode is, it's a setting on your TV which, rather than you go through and switch it into cinema mode and switch off picture processing like noise reduction and so on, and switch off the image smoothing and so on, it's a one button click, or metadata will come up and it'll say, do you want it in film mode? And all it does is it switches all that off for you. And it leaves it in the best possible mode where nothing is being added. It's the correct white point. It's the correct image settings for the material that you're watching. There's nothing clever other than it's switching things off. And
that's not exactly new, is it? I mean, film modes, cinema modes, ISF modes, THX modes have all essentially been doing this for a number of years now. The idea behind this initiative is to have a single unified name for it, because obviously every manufacturer tends to have different names for the same thing, be it cinema mode, theatre mode, movie mode, film mode, THX, ISF. The consumer gets confused. Now, hopefully with a name like filmmaker mode, it makes it relatively obvious what it's for, and they'll know how to either select it with a dedicated button on the remote, or it can actually automatically do it on, say, the LG TVs if you wanted to. Filmmaker mode is a one button press that takes away all the fat and leaves you with what you want at the end of the day. That is all Filmmaker does. But for some reason, some people, and I've seen some tweets, some pretty hilarious tweets actually, of people just not understanding what the Filmmaker mode is. Basically, it switches everything off, leaves it as it should be seen. And no one's making you use it. You don't have to.
No, exactly. But what Panasonic have done with their TVs, coming back to Panasonic, is that they have, because they're doing Dolby Vision IQ, they thought, well, we've got this fancy sensor, why don't we apply this to Filmmaker mode so we can have like a Dolby Vision IQ experience for HDR10, HLG, and any other HDR format that the TV can do. And
SDR. I think.
And SDR, yes, it does work in SDR, and make that sensor adjusted. Now, what it doesn't have is it doesn't have the metadata. But what was explained to me was that obviously it uses the same type of algorithm that HDR10 Plus uses in terms of how it adapts the picture to on a scene-by-scene or frame-by-frame basis. So basically it's using histograms and other measurements within the image so it can tell what the image is supposed to be scene-by-scene, frame-by-frame, and so on, and applies that. Now, there's some proprietary stuff in there, I am sure, which was skittered around, but that's basically what it's doing. So it is really quite a clever system. It's not just a light sensor that's suddenly going to boost everything up so you get a grey-looking mess on the screen. And again, we had some time spent with this. What did you think, Steve?
I thought it was quite impressive, actually. I mean, like you say, it's not actually using metadata in the way that Dolby Vision IQ is, but it's a sophisticated approach using the built-in light sensor. And the effect is, it's certainly looking at the demos they did, it didn't negatively affect the image quality. It just, made it more visible in brighter viewing conditions, but without losing that original intent. So having seen the same content, in a darkened environment, I could see that it was quite close like you say, Phil, a subtle improvement for the viewing conditions, but without, adversely affecting the filmmaker's intent. So, like you say, not boosting the brightness and not messing around with the gamma curve too much. So, yeah, I also thought it was pretty good.
Yep, same here. I was really impressed. I was impressed in CES, and again, spending a bit more time with it on this occasion. I'm looking forward to getting the TVs in so I can play about with it a bit more, because it, like I say, there is an issue there. It's not like this is coming along to solve a problem that doesn't exist. It is a problem that exists, and at the end of the day, we would much rather people were seeing this content as close as possible to how it should be seen, so you can enjoy it and find it entertaining and be moved emotionally and all the rest of it, because there's a lot to be said about what a filmmaker does to control your emotions by using sound and so on, but also by using colour, and it's something that's done so subtly that a lot of people miss that's actually happening in front of them. So anything that improves the viewing experience, I'm certainly a fan of, and I'm looking forward to getting these TVs. And do you want to quickly go through the LCD TVs, Steve?
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, in terms of the OLEDs, quickly, one thing that I didn't particularly like is the new stands. I know that they said, they swivel, said they'd invented it or something, weren't they? It's like, yeah, all TVs used to swivel in the past, but you can swivel the screen, which I think is something people have been asking for some time. And it's a smaller stand, which means you can fit the TV on a smaller surface without having to have a really wide surface with, where they have feet at either end of the panel, that sort of stuff. So that's a good thing. I've got to say, I preferred last year's stands, although they didn't swivel. I thought they looked a bit nicer. I think the HZ1000 is identical in terms of its.
It is, yeah. It's only the 1000 and 1500.
But the 1000 and the 1500, yeah. I don't. Obviously, we don't know about the other TV yet because we haven't seen it. They haven't finalised that. But I wouldn't make. I think some people have mentioned it in the threads, but yeah, I can't say I'm massively a fan of that myself either.
Do you know what? I didn't even notice. so I know they're circular, but I didn't really notice, to be honest with you. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what those stands are like. I do like the swivel though. I've got to say,
I do like swivels. Yeah, I think that's always handy. So in terms of the LCDs, there was there's two main, three. So the HX940 and the HX900 and the HX800. Now all of these, correct me if I'm wrong, Phil, use edge LED backlighting.
Yeah, there's no FALD.
No FALDs this year. So they all use edge LED lighting. I mean, obviously in terms of features, the same as the OLEDs, HDR10 Plus, Dolby Vision. I think they're doing both formats throughout their entire range now, from the 800 all the way up to the HZ1000. So I mean that's good, because it means whichever TV you buy, whatever your budget is, you can get both formats, which I think is a really nice touch. Screen sizes wise, they vary. There's quite a lot of, obviously on the LCDs, a lot more variance, where it's just 55 and 65 on the OLEDs. There's no 77-inch and no 48-inch yet, or as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, what you've got to bear in mind is that this is Panasonic's year start, beginning of the year. There is IFA. They normally announce some things around about IFA, so it could be that they have more announcements later in the year.
Yeah, so you might see something else, but at the moment it's 55 and 65, and that's your lot. In terms of the LCDs, there's 40-inch, 50-inch, 58, 65, 75 inches, so that they've got a much bigger range. I think the HX940, the flagship model, goes up to 75 inches, and they have one of those actually on show. It uses Local Dimming Intelligent Pro. Obviously, that's not local dimming in the sense of having a direct LED backlight behind the screen with zones of LED. So it's applying the local dimming as an algorithm using processing. There was a demo of it, which didn't look too bad. Given the limitations, I think actually it looked pretty good. Obviously, they're going for thin panels, basically. I suppose there's a cost factor associated as well in terms of using FALDs, but they seem to want to offer very thin LCD TVs, perhaps to match the really thin OLEDs. It's I guess it all comes down to pricing at the end of the day, but there's certainly a solid LCD range. Not going to set the world on fire, but I think you can easily tell that Panasonic's real focus is in terms of pushing technologies is with the OLEDs, and particularly the HZ1000. They showed the local dimming. They also showed the new home screen platform, which now has a launcher bar, which is quite a nice addition. So it's still basically the same platform, but instead of having a home screen, it now has a launcher bar, which is definitely a move in the right direction. I did ask them about Now TV, Disney Plus, and I'm forgetting one, Apple TV Plus. And all they would say was they were in discussions. Yeah. So I don't know what's happening there. Oh, and they also demoed the sound system as well. So they demoed the upward firing sound system on 1500, which again sounded pretty good. Yeah, I think it's a pretty solid lineup of TVs. Not massively different from last year, but as you said, Phil, what could they really add that they hadn't already put in last year? It's a nice little evolution, and there are some useful features in things like Dolby Vision IQ and intelligent sensing, filmmaker mode. Yeah,
those are OLED only, by the way. Those are not on the LCDs. So the LCDs will do Dolby Vision and HDR10 Plus, but they don't do IQ and they don't do filmmaker mode. That's OLED only. Another bit of information, so obviously somebody was listening to our podcast at Panasonic when we mentioned, why can't Panasonic add filmmaker mode onto last year's GZ1000 and GZ models? It was explained to me that it all comes down to memory, and if they were to put the filmmaker mode in, you would lose THX on the GZ models. So
I suspect that many people would consider that a perfectly acceptable transfer.
Yes, and obviously there's licensing issues because they've licensed those models with THX, and that's why they have THX modes in them. So that's the reason that I was given for it not being backwards compatible, is you would lose THX. And THX Cinema and Dark mode. So yeah, that seems fair enough.
If you own a 2019 Panasonic TV, stick it in ISF dark room, and you'll basically be filmmaker
exactly.
mode.
That's filmmaker mode. Yeah, and of course the intelligent sense and stuff wouldn't be transferable backwards either, because that's been developed for this year's models. So you're not losing out is basically the message I got, because you're going to lose those picture modes if you wanted filmmaker mode added in. And to be honest with you, yeah, like Steve says, you can get around that and just make sure you switch everything off. That's all filmmaker mode is, people. Cinema mode or THX mode or ISF with everything else switched off. So like you say, that's the Panasonic lineup. Looking forward to getting them in for review. I'm not expecting huge differences in picture performance, but like I say, picture performance this year was absolutely spot on. So there wasn't anywhere they could really go with it. So anyway, and it was a nice afternoon out at Pinewood.
It was a fun afternoon. Yeah.
Unfortunately, with flights and everything else, I didn't get to stay to the end. I had to move quickly to go and get my flight back to Newcastle, and with it being a windy day and all the rest of it, I was expecting delays. So I didn't get to see it all, but I was in the mixing room with yourself, Steve, which is the first Dolby Atmos equipped finishing mixing suite outside of Dolby, and I've got to say I have heard some fantastic cinemas in my short career of 20 odd years. That was amongst the best I've heard in terms of just sheer dynamics and transient from quiet to loud back to deathly quiet again. It was extraordinary. It really was.
It was a scene from Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald, and the sound designer Glenn Fremantle was there to show it to us and to talk us through it. And I watched that scene, and when I got home that evening, I put the same scene on my system, which, in fairness, sounded good. But you can't beat however many speakers were in that. I mean, there were
and the sheer
30,
space,
40
as well.
speakers, and the size of the space, and the sheer amount of power and headroom. I mean, it is a different experience. I mean, obviously, Dolby Atmos in the cinema is not the same as Dolby Atmos in the home. They are different formats. I mean, they essentially try and in the home they're trying to mimic what they're doing in the cinema, but in the cinema it's a whole different level in terms of the number of speakers involved and the way that they move objects around the room and everything. It's not the same. And so that was an eye opener. But it was really, really fun to sort of actually have the person who designed in trying to explaining the creative process and the idea that what they were trying to get across was a feeling of power. Two wizards dueling, and there's this massive power, two massive powers hitting one another, and I think they achieved that admirably in the sound mix that we saw.
No, it's you get experiences like that every now and again, and it's one where, because I think we get to a point where we get a little bit complacent, don't we, Steve? You get a little bit, I've seen it all, heard it all, and then you get an experience like that, and you think, actually, I haven't heard it all. And that was
because we were sat in the sofa where, Sam Mendes would have sat when they were doing the mix for 1917, or Danny Boyle sat, or Alfonso Cuarón would have been sat where we were sat when they were mixing Gravity, which Glenn Fremantle won an Oscar for. So. That was a real treat.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, let's move on, because there was a hi-fi show happening at Bristol. It happens every year. It's been over 30 years now, isn't it, Ed?
33 years, of which I've done 17 consecutive ones.
Yeah.
Which is tragic, but, an unavoidable fact of these
Well,
things.
Made it sound like a
has
prison sentence.
Murderers get less. It now means I've spent more than a complete calendar month in the environs of the Marriott Hotel Bristol, which the staff in the Marriott are lovely, and it's all fine, but it's not on the bucket list of global hotels. Let's be honest. But no, it's the second year of it being described as a hi-fi show, and just to keep everyone on their toes, there was actually a surprising amount of multi-channel stuff there. Let's cover that first. In no particular order, Arcam, Kef, Focal, SVS, Canton, and there is somebody else, I can't remember who it was. They were all doing, demonstrations with films and stuff. Oh yes, Denon had some things running with their soundbar and so on and so forth, as did Henley Designs on their Henley Audio, on their booth with the Klipsch soundbar, which I believe has just been gently tweaked from the one that Steve looked at. So whilst I don't necessarily think it's nowhere near the glory days of where there were umpteen manufacturers and lots more in the way of actual video demonstration. If you came looking for a television or projector, you were basically out of luck. I believe What Hi-Fi had one of the 8K OLEDs on their stand, and that was about the end of that. But nevertheless, there was some multi-channel items there. The most interesting one for me, and it's in the show report, is the Focal Cora with the integrated Atmos speaker. It's by far and away the most elegant engineering solution for any of the Atmos solutions I've seen, be it integrating it or using a bolt-on speaker. Obviously, it looks more elegant than the bolt-on speakers, but essentially by making sure the tweeter assembly is in quite a compact enclosure, the angling required for an upward firing speaker to pass Atmos certification is all there. It's still flush with the top of the cabinet. And it's now Focal had selected a smaller room than some of the other people doing multi-channel demonstrations, but nevertheless I thought it sounded properly tidy. So hopefully I'm sure that Steve can get a look at those at some point during this year, and that was impressive. Otherwise, the good thing about Bristol compared to Munich especially, and actually a number of the other shows both nationally and internationally, because it's organised by a dealer chain, and because customers or visitors are encouraged to try and buy things at the show, it does tend to mean that manufacturers don't just simply select the most expensive thing they make and bring it along. So we did see some new things, and we saw some new things that are relatively affordable. Monitor Audio Bronze. This is the 8th generation of Bronze speakers, in case you weren't already feeling old. They go on sale imminently. Monitor Audio was quite honest admitting that some of the illness issues affecting Southeast Asia are also affecting production, so it's a little bit delayed over where they'd like it to be. But the new range starts at 260 quid, and they had both the stand mounts, the larger of the two stand mounts and the larger of the two floor standers. The floor standers in particular sounded absolutely brilliant, and I don't mean good for a speaker at I think about 750, 800 quid, but genuinely good. I was really impressed. And I mean, Monitor Audio's aesthetics, they've always been a bit Marmitey, but I say it's a pretty good looking range of loudspeakers with some good finishes. If you're a multi-channel fan, you get a dedicated rear effects speaker. There's a top Atmos module speaker as well. I think for the first time, Steve, has Monitor Audio done one of those before?
No, I don't think they have.
No, so I think this was a first. That wasn't running. They were doing stereo only, but nevertheless, it looks like they've got all the bits there. It's a good looking range of speakers, and in stereo at least, it sounded absolutely brilliant. Really, really impressed. Also, at the sensible end of pricing, Riga have come up with a small amplifier called the IO, and brilliantly, it's called the IO because it's half of a Brio. Which, I mean, in terms of naming, you can't fault that logic. I thought that was really good. That's about 380 quid. You get 30 odd watts, a phono stage, 2 inputs, remote control, all metal chassis. It's a lovely little thing. There's the Kite loudspeaker. That's Kite with a Y as opposed to the Red Kite with an I. That's £449. And the big deal is that when those 2 units are in production and all good to go, Riga is going to combine that in dealers with a planar 1 turntable. So the turntable, amp, and speakers, all the string that you need to connect it together for £999. Now that still sounds, it's not money you lose down the back of the sofa, but it's all built in the UK. It gives you multiple points of upgrading it as and when you feel like doing so. It sounded unreasonably good in the hotel bedroom where it was set up. And I think it's really admirable that, unlike a lot of manufacturers, and there's no point naming names because it's almost all of them, Riga is still searching for answers to how you actually get new people in through the door. And that's really admirable. And I thought it sounded absolutely fantastic. A little bit further at the price point, got PMC. There's the 2025i, which, due to, again, not capitalizing things and the rest of it, just makes Word explode in a flurry of red and blue lines. These are model to model the same as the preceding 2025 models, but they've improved the tweeter, they've played about with the crossover, they've changed the mounting bars for the spikes on the floor standers, and generally just tweaked and improved it, hence the I for improved. They were confident enough in what they'd done to do a side-by-side demonstration with the old model of the 23, so the smaller of the 3 floor standers, and it did sound better, even off axis, and early in the morning. There are some definite improvements there. I do slightly concern myself with the price. I mean, the cheapest of those speakers is now a fiver under £2,000, which it just feels like a lot of money. But nevertheless, they were very good. So, best of luck with that. And then from there, there's all sorts of other new things. I mean, there's a pair of fine audio speakers that do look and I do like fine, so I'm sorry to be rude. They do look ever so slightly like they're made out of plumbing fixtures, but they sounded fantastic. So I don't really care about that.
It's an ugly looking speaker.
It's
there is no denying that.
Sod. But it sounded absolutely magnificent. So let's ignore us. Yes.
Did you get a chance to listen to the SVS SB2000 Pro that I was talking about last week?
Only briefly, because I only got in to take a photo of it before they opened on the Saturday, but they were giving a quick bit of Alita Battle Angel. Now, there's been some feedback in the comments section. I felt, just watching that sequence, standing in the room as opposed to in the doorway, when this is a very important distinction we'll cover in a moment, I felt that it was working pretty nicely. Some of the feedback in the thread, other people felt it was overloading the room. Just to point out, if you do not make it into the middle or near the middle of these Marriott hotel bedrooms, it's about plus 8 dB, especially in the lower registers in the hallway section. So if you don't make it any further than that, almost everything's going to sound terrible. This is a really important distinction to make. I cannot stress how important it is enough to get your elbows out and get into the middle of the room. So I only heard it briefly, but as far as I'm concerned, it sounded really tidy. And using 2 smaller subs felt better to me than putting one of their pile drivers in there and, doing some thuggery. Although that said, as you can also see in the show report, Rel brought 6 subs along.
I was just going to ask about
6
this.
of the what?
So they're doing the line array.
S150s.
All right.
In a line array. Now, I think with the best will in the world, Rel isn't expecting too many normal humans to do that, especially I mean, I don't know exactly how much an S150 costs, but then partnering it with a small pair of KEF
About
references.
1,800 quid.
Is it S150 because you put S510 in your report?
Oh, sorry, hang on, I get confused. I'll check in a second, and I'll make sure it's correct.
It's S510.
S510, sorry,
that's the one you mean, yeah. There's the 812 and the 510.
Yeah, I mean, that's the small... I mean, it's still quite an expensive subwoofer.
Yes.
And having 6 of them...
But you see, this is the kind of batshit I'd do.
Yeah,
No,
no.
absolutely.
Here's the thing. Used in the way that Rel was intending to, it's just effortless. You know, you would imagine, you look at the photos, you think it must be like it standing in the middle of an explosion, and it just
No,
wasn't.
it's not. Yeah, it's filling it in. Yeah, it's creating an effect. It's filling in the blanks.
Their argument would be the reason that they do these stacks, 2 stacks, is because bass has a degree of height to it as well. I mean, it's maybe not so directional, but doesn't mean to say it's all going to be at the floor level. You can have it higher up, particularly if you're listening to music, for example. It can. I mean, if you go to a concert, a live concert, they'll have massive stacks of speakers, and it's the same kind of principle, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
But obviously, there is a cost factor associated.
No, absolutely. But it sounded extremely good, and also it wasn't the only example of stacking. Falcon Acoustics. Now, I've not done any Falcon Acoustics for AVForums, which is something I'll correct in the fullness of time. They make a licensed version of the LS35 BBC monitor, which is one of my favourite loudspeakers. It's a lovely thing, and it's so influential to how we think about small speakers performing. But I'm the first person to admit that LS35s don't do bass. They're tiny little sealed boxes. They can't do bass. However, Falcon had decided to stack 8 of them, so 4 aside, just horizontally on top of each other to create an interesting, and it must be said, is a distinctive aesthetic for a set of speakers. But that sounded absolutely brilliant. Really, really, really good. So yeah, who knows? Stacking might be line arrays of stuff. That's maybe the trend for 2020.
I am willing to try this out, so Rel, if you want to send them across,
6 of them over.
6 of them over. I'm happy to damage my back for this experiment.
I do have two of the S510s coming. Rob's bringing them over on Tuesday.
Well,
but not 6.
Come on,
I'm glad to say.
Add to the order. Come on, Steve.
I don't want 6. Block the bloody screen.
Well, okay, yeah, fine.
You got to remember Steve's small as well, so 2 of them is probably about up to his chest.
Well, I'm not going to stack them. I was going to put them on either side of the room anyway. Could stack them, I suppose. Give it a go.
But no, that was the. I'm just going to fire up the show report to, because obviously it's been it's over 24 hours since I was anywhere near it. Not yet.
You were hungover, weren't you, on Saturday, I'd imagine?
Actually, nowhere near as badly as I have been in the past. So no, I mean, it's just a sure sign that I'm getting old.
Yeah.
I was in bed by half midnight.
One thing that interested me was the Rotel stuff, the Michi components.
I cannot stress how inadequate my photography is for how sumptuous those are in the flesh. I didn't make it down to the launch. I was very disappointed about this because I'd set aside time to get down to the south coast, but I turned on Google Traffic and there were 4 separate accidents between me and Brighton, and it was giving me an arrival time sometime after the conference had actually finished. So I didn't get down there. But no, you're absolutely right. Essentially, Rotel has been making Michi line products for over 30 years. We haven't seen that many of them in Europe historically because Bowers and Wilkins has distributed Rotel for quite a long time, but they also distributed Class A for quite a long time. So there was they didn't really want to deal with the overlap. So Rotel product finished at price X and Class A products went up from there. But Class A is now defunct from Bowers and Wilkins' perspective and now part of the whatever Denon and Marantz are calling themselves this week. So the Michi stuff is back. This is the latest iteration of Michi components. And yes, provided that you have your own forklift truck, these look very, very interesting because the preamp, absolutely classic analog preamp, beautiful piece of industrial design. And then there's a stereo amp, which is reasonably powerful. But I mean, if you're going to do this, you may as well go all in. The monoblocks, 60 kilos each, 1,080 watts into 8 ohms. that's a continuous. That's not a PMPO figure or anything unpleasant like that. So yes, there's very few speakers on Earth that are going to find themselves needing more.
And
than
that's
they
what, £5,400 per mono.
Yeah, which please don't misunderstand me. That is a lot of money, but you can spend a lot more money, and I don't think you'd necessarily be getting a more rigorously engineered amplifier than that. Now, with the best will in the world, I would love to spend some time with them here, but I don't think that's mechanically possible. But Phil and the rest of the team, we've worked out the mechanics of an off-site review protocol. So I got to speak to Bowers and Wilkins about reviewing something of theirs anyway. So if I can, and if it's practical to do so, and if there's the interest in it, yeah, I'd be delighted to spend a bit more time getting to know those. So yes, I mean, obviously, if you can't do 60 kilos per amp plus preamp, Musical Fidelity had the compact option because it's only 46 kilos.
60 kilos.
The M8XI integrated amplifier. Now, I mean, I admire this. It takes a special company to look at a 500 watt integrated amplifier that they already make and go, I don't know if that's powerful enough. But they have, and the M8XI is more powerful still. And it has a lot more features than the M6500i. So yes, a 550 watt integrated amplifier. So yeah, if I can work out exactly how much damage that will cause me in a physiological sense moving that around, I do intend to review that here. So yeah, that should be good. And actually, Henley Audio is a busy show for them. They also had the new Klipsch Legacy. So there's the Heresy and the Cornwall. They're now onto the 4th generation of those, and it's only taken them 62 years to get to the 4th generation. They haven't messed about with the basics. They still look like they've fallen out of the hole in time, but they've tweaked them here and there. And the Heresies were running in one of the upstairs rooms. There's a photo of it on the show report. This is an important. Ironically, I'm going to steal something that one of the Harman International guys. I overheard him saying this to a customer because there was an Arcam SA30 in the little JBL retro speakers in the hotel foyer, and he was saying to a customer, "It's a music speaker, not a hi-fi speaker," which is. I don't know if that counts as damning with faint praise, but yeah, if you want to know what colour underwear the artist you're listening to was wearing, these are not the speakers for you. In terms of just sitting there and listening to it and loving it, they were absolutely brilliant. And on the plus side, given that they don't exactly look up to date now, they're not going to look any worse in 10 years' time, are they? So yeah, that was a genuinely good one. And I'd also like to say massive respect to Living Voice for turning up for their first show in 8 or 9 years and bringing a complete mains isolated battery power supply with them. So they were running on electricity that they'd harvested in Nottingham in Bristol.
And that changed the sound how?
I don't know, but I admire them for doing it. You could buy, I tell you what, you can buy your own. They sell their off-board power supplies. It was just £8,000 for that one. Yeah. So
I mean, the Bristol show, it's the type of place that you could go and actually buy a bottle of air from somewhere else and be charged a fortune, and you'd happily do it, or happily find customers there that would.
Well, Cord Cables have successfully got their mystery goo that Steve and I heard a few years ago. They've been improving the mystery goo, so that's now for sale for paid customers. So if you want mystery goo, there you go. It's good to go. And professionally, this was asked. I got a message about this, and I did explain to the person. They're in the show report. Cord Electronics have released new products. And someone has asked me if I was going to review the 2Go. I can't review the 2Go. I don't make a great secret about this. I do the technical support for Cord Electronics, so that's a conflict of interest that is simply not suitable for me to go anywhere near their products in a critical review sense. If you have any questions about 2Go, I am only too happy to answer them, as I've spent some time getting it ready to say. So yes, but no, that was
not product support. You're the man.
Well, no, it's how I pay my mortgage and my child support. You know, we all got to eat, Steve. I mean, in terms of the vibe. I still quite like Bristol. Against all the odds, it's still a relevant show. It still manages to have new product there, which is bizarre for what is a regional trade show. But nevertheless, I think it's still a good visit. It seemed well attended, although a weird phenomenon of how crowds are moving in these shows, in so much as people seem to be moving in waves. You'll have a point where there's no one in a room, and then they turn up 15 strong. I mean, you would have thought if you were continuously getting in each other's way, you'd just stand somewhere for a bit and wait for it to clear slightly, but apparently not. So, yeah.
I'll tell you what, I mean, Hi-Fi must be paying, because you look at what they were on show here, and this is just going through your report here, Ed, and there's stuff like preamps for $12,500, $9,500 for a power amp, $6,000 for a power amp, $3,400 for, what was that, the planar 10? Oh no, that was $6,219.
Yeah, well, that's with the new cartridge, obviously.
Okay.
But no, you're absolutely right. But the thing is, and we've had this conversation,
they're obviously making huge margins here, which is obviously paying for it.
Well, there's two separate points to this, and I've had this conversation, and you grudgingly agree. AV destroyed this section of the market for itself. It replaced its products too quickly. It destroyed the residual value of old products. Customers don't like being told that their stuff is valued, or experiencing that their stuff is valueless after an incredibly short space of time. It's commercial suicide. Hi-Fi never did that. So the thing is, if you go onto our classifieds, if you go onto the eBays, the Hi-Fi Sharks of this world, there's if you wanted to see what was at Bristol 5-6 years ago, the people buying this stuff are paying for it by getting a surprising amount of the value of the products they bought that period of time ago back. Yeah, I don't argue with any of that, Ed, at all. I agree with you completely, and it's the way of the world. But again, it just shows you that there's money out there.
There's money to be made, absolutely.
And there were some. There was some quite eyebrow-raising headline sales of things that were sort of, scuttlebutt creeping back about what certain people had bought and so on and so forth.
Seemingly Chris Harris was there. Was
he now? That was careless.
He was there. What day was he there? Because I noticed the tweet and I thought, I'm bound to see Ed in this photograph, but you weren't there.
I'd left by 11:30 on Saturday.
Name statement.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was, so that's now up at a whisker, and I think it's $190,000 for a name statement.
So he turned up to have a listen to that, and then away again.
Well, best of luck to him. Do you want to know something that's absolutely crazy about that name statement? I was speaking to Claire Newsom, who now is the sales director for Name. There's a customer in Australia who bought a name statement preamp power amplifier. So that, as I say, is adjusted for import and the rest of it, he paid about £180,000. And then he's bought 2 more sets of power amplifiers for tri-amping. And those are about another £96,000 a set. So yeah, it's a whole different world of madness. So yeah, but at the very least, we can look at that. But that's next to the fact that there are the Rigas, the monitor audios of this world still producing great stuff at trying to get people in at the bottom. At the moment, the pyramid is still. It's not quite the fatness of pyramid that we'd ideally like, but there is still at least a bottom of the pyramid. For as long as that bottom exists, it's all fine. And that's not a statement to take out of context.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I trust you to go there. Right, that's it from the Bristol show and the Panasonic launch and so on. We're moving on to movies next. Right, so moving on to movies. Kaz, have we got anything to review movie-wise? Because we haven't for the last few weeks, because me and Steve have kind of stopped going to the cinema.
Yeah, I mean, I thought for once we could go forwards rather than backwards. So I got to see a preview of the latest film from Richard Stanley. For those who don't know, Richard Stanley came into existence doing a couple of indie flicks back in the day, Hardware and Dust Devil, both of which are now cult classics. And then he got to do Island of Dr. Moreau, with
didn't quite
Brando
get to
and
do it.
Kilmer. Yeah, he did all the pre-production. He started the film, and then he got booted off for Frankenheimer, and he hasn't returned to film for 25 years.
If you go on to Amazon Prime, there's a film called Lost Soul. About the making of the Young Dr. Moreau, which is a brilliant, really worth watching. It's very, very funny at times,
and has interviews from all the people.
Well,
probably better than the film itself.
Much better than the film is appalling. There's some cracking stuff in here. Some people don't come out of it well at all, particularly Val Kilmer. Apparently, when he'd finished his last scene, Frankenheimer yelled, "Right, get this bastard off my set." So that was he didn't even have a rap part. He was just chucked off after he finished. He was being so difficult. But yeah, it's called Lost Soul, and it's about the making of that film, and it is very, very funny and very interesting and well worth checking out.
I mean, I can believe it, but it's shocking that Stanley hasn't been... I'm a big fan of Dust Stuff.
Yeah, that was like 25 years ago.
Yeah, it was 25 years ago. So he's come out of nowhere to do this. Apparently, we should be really excited about the first of a trilogy of H.P. Lovecraft adaptations. And it's really good. It's an indie flick, sure. It's got a limited budget and only so much effects it can play with. It's backed by the same studio who made Nicolas Cage's Mandy, and they love the color purple. So this is just full-on neon purple. Definitely got an 80s vibe, very creepy. I probably would pitch it as something like a cross between The Thing and Annihilation, Netflix's Annihilation. So some good creepy moments in it.
Does it have a screaming bear? Because that was properly unsettling.
It doesn't, but it's got some properly unsettling screaming things in it.
Good, excellent, right.
It's got the classic little boy with glasses who kind of seems to, know about the other side kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not what you expect at all, but it's well worth checking out. Very creepy sci-fi mystery horror. Came out of nowhere. Happy that Stanley's back. Happy that there's a trilogy. So that's coming out on Friday.
All right, good stuff. Excellent.
I'm happy that Nicolas Cage has done something apparently quite good.
Well, I can see this is totally up his street after Mandy. Like he does like 19 films of nonsense every year, and then one which is
which allows him to do another 19 films of nonsense.
I mean, I can't say I'm not looking forward to the film. What is it like? The Unbearable Weight of My Own Ego, which is Nicolas Cage being Nicolas Cage, apparently. Something like that. It's supposed
Nicolas Cage has been doing Nicolas Cage for about 20 years.
Yeah,
he's become this kind of very kind of meta performer where he's playing himself or acting how Nicolas Cage would. But I think he's turned into a really good B-movie actor. I can see kind of his latter career, this kind of thing, because I've only seen the trailer, but it looks kind of insane in places, but that just seems to suit him so well.
Yes, it does.
And he's got that trademark thing that he does with his hands as well, doesn't he? Before he does something, it's like he shakes his hands and then it's like, go. It's weird.
He does that. It exemplifies to best effect in that scene in Gone in 60 Seconds when they're listening to the song, and he does that, and it's like, yes, let's go off and steal many cars.
Yeah.
Although his scenery was out-chewed by Christopher Eccleston in that.
I've got to say, flicking through Sky Movies the other night, The Rock was on. I haven't seen The Rock in years. My God, what a great film that is.
Yeah,
I'd forgotten about it.
Back when Michael Bay could actually make movies.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, God, we're all nostalgic again now, aren't we?
Right, so...
they used the Prodigy track in it, though. Out of space.
That would be magnificent.
That would be, if they ended it on
probably incongruous.
No, they didn't use the Prodigy track. Proper nice 80s kind of moody soundtrack, though. Very good, dark Stranger Things vibe. Like, proper dark.
Yeah,
what is it about the 80s that seems to suit horror so well?
Yeah, all the great horror films came from the 80s, I think.
Well, it's a video nasty thing, wasn't it, really? That's what kicked it off, the start of that. And then it was more the myths that surrounded these films than the actual films, wasn't it? Because let's face it, a lot of
them turned to be a bit crap.
Yeah, and a lot of us didn't actually see the film, so you made it up as you went along, just to be big in front of your mates and stuff. Right, so that's Colours Out of Space coming out on Friday. What else is heading our way?
We've got The Invisible Man. I'm I'm still a bit confused about this one. But yeah, we got The Invisible Man. That's coming out Friday, out in IMAX.
What are you confused about?
Doesn't seem to involve much.
It can't be the plot, surely.
I suppose because I was confused because there was this whole thing where they were going to do Universal Monsters.
Yeah.
They were going to do. They had Tom Cruise. They had Johnny Depp. They had.
And then The Mummy came
Russell
out.
Crowe.
Yeah, The Mummy came out.
The Mummy came out.
Yeah.
And
That was the end of
the
that.
picture from Vanity Fair with them all hanging around in suits just appears to have go from nowhere. They've all ditched it. Now we've got The Invisible Man, which is completely unrelated.
See, I'm really annoyed they've done that because it was a good idea. You know, if you go back to the kind of Universal monster horror classics, there's and the whole idea of having this kind of shared universe was that in the end you would get these kind of crossovers. And, you know, I would like to see go back to the days where you, almost like with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, where you could have, like, you know, Dracula versus the Wolfman or something.
Well, that's
you know,
what Universal wanted, but unfortunately,
exactly,
Mummy bombed.
Well,
I know,
Mummy, but the other thing, and I think this is one of those chalk it up to life being a bit unfortunate. Obviously, weren't there obviously issues around the allegations made against Johnny Depp, which now tragically appear to be
completely
largely
opposite,
groundless.
The opposite, in fact.
Yes, but nevertheless, that put a further stick in the wheel. So it's an unfortunate series of what ifs with that, because obviously the Mummy didn't help, and I completely agree with Steve. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter what you do when Tom Cruise is in a movie, it becomes a Tom Cruise movie. So it possibly even wasn't a brilliant example to lead on either. But yeah, it's just one of those things where I think a few different things combined to just sort of kill it before it ever really got running.
If it had succeeded, I wonder what the modern equivalent of Abbott and Costello would have been.
Oh. Well, one for the comments section there. I'm open to
Which
suggestions.
comedy duo would you like to have seen shoehorned into this towards the fag end of it, as they were starting to really lose a lot of money?
It would inevitably have been
Anton Deck.
Will Ferrell and John C. Reilly.
I would
surely.
definitely watch an Anton Deck meets the Mummy or Dracula.
I'd rather see Ant in one of the Fast and Furious films. I'll be honest.
Because they're that would be quite nice. Their alien autopsy movie, I always quite liked. That was good fun.
That would surely be Fast and Furious 15.
I just got an email from WoW HD confirming that my copy of Colour Out of Space is on its way.
Excellent.
How about that for serendipity?
Yeah, it all goes downhill from here, doesn't it?
Yeah, well played. Will Ferrell movie. It's not got great reviews already. It's a comedy drama about a family who are arguing.
Has Will Ferrell ever made a good movie?
Yeah, I like Will Ferrell.
Anchorman.
Talladega Nights is quite good.
Yes. I actually like Blades of Glory as well. I'm not going to lie. That's got some moment.
I got time for Will Ferrell, but yeah, recently he's had some interestingly bad stuff, and this looks thoroughly, Dark Waters I've also seen. That's also getting reviewed. That's Mark Ruffalo's latest. So I was a bit disappointed we weren't getting a solo Hulk movie, and he went off and did this film. And I thought, what is it? Because it's got the same name as a Korean remake horror from not that long ago.
Oh, it's based on it's a true story, and it's based on an article because it was DuPont, wasn't it?
Yeah,
in
It just
the
looks
States.
incredibly worthy.
Yes.
No, it's not though. It's really understated. It's really good. Very, very sobering.
Does he go green at any point from chemicals or anything else?
It's not Aaron Brockovich style. It's much more sobering than that. Like a little bit like when Adam Driver did The Report. It's just the cold hard facts of it, and it's tough.
When you said it's not Aaron Brockovich style, all I could think was Mark Ruffalo in a push-up bra.
Yeah, he didn't get far doing that.
Niche.
It's
it's really
quite
good,
the cast list as well, isn't it? Mark Ruffalo, Anne Hathaway, Tim Robbins.
Yeah. There's a good slew of people in it, and a really tragic, horrifying story, which I went and looked into it a little bit more afterwards. You do think about just how much this is in our products everywhere. But yeah, that's well worth checking out. That's also opens Friday. On 4K, we have Zombieland Double Tap. I still haven't got around to seeing it.
I've seen it. And the IMAX enhanced soundtrack is bass-tastic.
And the film?
The film's great. I really enjoyed it. It's very funny. It's more of the same. But I thought for 10 years later, they did a pretty good job of picking up and keeping it fresh. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. And the soundtrack is absolutely monstrous. I mean, it's like typical DTS, really. Everything's about 10 louder. It goes up to 11.
Goes up to 11,
Yeah.
But no, it's great fun. I recommend it highly.
I watched. I finally got around to seeing Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Believe it or not, it's been sitting there.
Year and a half late.
Yeah, it's been sitting there for ages.
Bass, yeah.
But you're talking about bass, and you're talking about really loud soundtracks. Normally, I'll listen at like -7, -8 under reference. This was -15, and it was still. I thought it was going to get structural damage with the bass in that. It was, and it had that phenomenal Atmos effect that you only really hear in big cinemas or big screenings, where the bass actually moves from the screen towards you. And there's a few.
When the machines, that scene, I think, when are the machines blowing up? Isn't it?
Yeah, the machines are shooting at each other, but you get this bass sort of wave comes towards you. And I've only ever had that happen to me in big auditoriums. I've never actually had that effect in the home cinema before, so that was really well done. So I was fantastic soundtrack. And the film was great as well. The film was absolutely brilliant.
It's a really good film,
yeah. So there you go. A year and a half later, that's what I think. It'll be my disc of the month this month.
Oh, it's a tremendous one. It's got to be my favourite Spider-Man flick, actually. Good. I'm gonna go controversial there, but I'm gonna say it's my favourite, even though it's not live action. It's my favourite.
So Zombieland Double Tap is worth picking up on disc, is it?
Definitely. It looks good too. Yeah, right. It's a great movie.
What about Blu-ray? Cars.
Nothing coming out this month on this week on Blu-ray.
What's happening with Blu-ray then? Is it finished?
It says Holiday. It's Holiday, not a film then.
Well, I think there are some smaller releases that are coming out, but there's nothing mainstream other than, well, these days you have the Blu-rays that are coming out in 4K. But there's holidays coming out from a small producer called Anti-Worlds. It's a very dark mystery drama, very, very graphic sexual violence.
Yeah, this is the one with Kate Winslet and
it's definitely not the one with Kate Winslet. No, it's Irreversible Style.
Cameron Diaz. Wasn't that The Holiday? I think
it's a tough watch.
Right.
That's coming out if you want to cheer up your Monday. And in streaming, we have Altered Carbon Season 2, which I've been looking forward to since they announced the first season. I'm a big Altered Carbon fan. I got into the books a long time ago and
still haven't seen season 1.
You have to.
Really good.
It's really, really good. There's 3 books: Altered Carbon, Broken Angels, Woken Furies, and he's talking about doing another series of books because of the Netflix series.
Is it the same character going across?
It's the same character.
Different actor.
So a lot of people are getting confused about this. The premise of Altered Carbon is that in the future you have a stack inserted into your spine, which carries your soul and all your memories and everything, and you can swap that stack out into any host.
They call them sleeves, which is a body, basically.
So you can data link to other worlds in a second, just to download into another host where you are yourself, but in a different body. So Altered Carbon, the first season, the guy, the lead character, Takashi Kovacs, wasn't in his own body. He was downloaded into the sleeve of a police detective, and he had to go about in this neo-noir Blade Runner-esque world, essentially solving a crime. The second one, which is based on Broken Angels, is proper Full Metal Fury military action on a off-world. So he's in a different body. He's the same character, but he's been re-sleeved, and it's really good. Very, very different from the first one. Tonally.
So, forgive me, it does sound a lot like Quantum Leap.
Yeah.
That's time travel. This is just
Quantum Leap also involved the changing of bodies.
Yes.
yes. I
in
suppose
effect, it's military Quantum Leap. I can see where you're going with that, but it works superbly.
So he doesn't have to remain male. He can change gender.
You could put him into female body, and in fact, that's something they do play with in the first season.
Yes.
At one point, don't they?
Yes,
it's a really clever concept because I think it's the future. I mean, they will one day be able to put your brain, your consciousness onto a hard drive, and then that's how you crack interstellar travel, isn't it? You just get beamed at the speed of light to be downloaded to another body on another planet. Yeah. There's some really interesting ideas.
Proper good sci-fi.
Yeah, it's good hardcore sci-fi. And it's also full of lots of swearing and violence and nudity. So on that basis,
I've read a report that said that loads of people complained about the excess amount of graphic female nudity in the first one.
I think the first one you're referring to the scene where the guy has to fight off about 14 nude clones.
The female cop has an interesting fight with some clones. I'm not really sure why the clones would be dressed though. So although that was the
point, wasn't it? They wouldn't be dressed. They're basically the super rich never die. They just clone themselves, and when the body gets damaged, they get the stack put into another clone of themselves. So they're always young and always pretty. But you'd have this cold storage where they've got hundreds of clones of someone. I don't think they needed the nappies from Alien to make it more of a plausible scene. Anyway, sure, it's graphic violence and graphic sex and graphic nudity, but less so second season. It also looks fantastic.
It does. Netflix have gone out of their way on this one. I can't wait for second season. It's got Falcon in it.
Yes, it's
Anthony Mackie as Kovac. So, and it's got a few of the returning characters from the first season. You probably have to watch the first, and you probably have to watch it and pay attention because
yes, it doesn't spoon-feed you.
I can watch it. I don't know about paying attention.
To a certain extent, you need. I mean, we've given you the basis here, but you have to really understand it's the same character in a bunch of different sleeves. Because if you don't know that, the first few scenes are of completely different characters, and you're like, "Well, what's going on here?" It's him. He's just in different sleeves, in different points of his life.
Okay, thanks.
Anyway,
thanks.
Well worth checking out. That's coming Thursday.
Kaz,
yes.
You forgot. Yes, it's on Thursday. You also forgot that tomorrow, Monday, when this podcast goes out, we've got season 5 of Better Call Saul.
Yeah, you know,
also on Netflix.
Season 1. You know what I haven't seen? I haven't seen all of Breaking Bad.
I can't believe it.
I never found it.
Yeah, I haven't seen all of Breaking Bad. To the point where I watched the movie, which I really enjoyed, with a recap.
Spoiler then.
So I mean, yeah, the recap did. I mean, watching the little bit before the beginning of the movie was enough. But yeah, I didn't ever fully get into Breaking Bad, and so
obviously didn't get into Better Call Saul. But if you are into it, it starts again tomorrow or Monday when this is going up.
Yeah,
and it's an excellent series.
Yeah, we were doing so well for time as well. Right, ending on a cheery note. We did it last week. We're going to do it again this week, ending on a cheery note. So last week it was apocalypse movies, end of the world. This week we're not going to go quite as far. This week it's more natural disasters and storm-based films. So favourites could be stuff like, I'll pick one off the top of my head. Guilty pleasure of mine is Twister.
Twister's everyone's guilty pleasure.
It is.
If you don't like Twister, it's everyone's guilty pleasure. If it's one of those things where if you encounter it on a terrestrial television channel, unless you actually have to physically go off and do something, you'll probably just watch the rest of it, however much of it is left to go, because it's just the right level of utterly brainless as to be nearly perfect.
But it's also got a great cast list.
It does. I mean, it's pretty much, in that regard, it's pretty much faultless. Although tragically, an enormous number of the cast aren't alive anymore. But no, it's great, and it's got the world's most windproof Dodge Ram pickup truck as well for fans of physics. So no, it's brilliant. I love it. It's also it's one of the first films I went off on my own to see at the cinema, which it means it's forever nostalgic. Yes, I know I am. Thank you. I was 12.
I have a lot of time for Twister, and I'd probably apply a lot of that logic. And I know it's controversial again to Armageddon. I actually quite like Armageddon.
Is an asteroid? It's
not a natural disaster or weather.
Well,
is it?
Kind of is.
It is if it hits.
Asteroids coming towards.
It's not weather. Can we be clear about this? Asteroids are not weather. They're space.
So volcanoes and that kind of thing.
So Into the Storm, since we're talking about Twister movies or tornado movies, I've always quite enjoyed that.
Yeah, I've got that somewhere. And Dante's Peak. I have to say, I bloody love Dante's Peak.
Dante's Peak and Volcano were the two for that year, weren't they?
Dante's Peak kicks Volcano's butt.
It did,
Team Dante's Peak. Yeah.
Although there is a great scene in Volcano where a guy has to carry a child.
Oh yeah, but that's fine.
Through the lava, walking through the lava as it melts him just to save the child. I'm still haunted by that. But can we count like Poseidon Adventure?
Yeah, that's right.
So.
Okay, so I got time for that more than like.
Which
Titanic.
one? The remake
no,
or the
no, there
the
isn't
original?
a which one. Just the original. The remake is one of those movies that is just head scratchingly bad.
Not as quite. So I was going to say the remake might be bad. I went and saw at the cinema, and God knows why, because I don't think I'd even seen the Poseidon Adventure. But I went to see Beyond the Poseidon Adventure, which is the one where they spend their time trying to break into the upturned ship to steal something. I think Michael Caine is the lead in that one, and that really is crap.
Yeah, I don't know why you'd go back there. But the scenes. I mean, Poseidon's proper classic. That's Hackman, isn't it? Hackman and Borgnine.
Shelley Winters.
Yeah, the bit
Red buttons.
I remember I've got to jump and turn the giant cog to save everyone's life, but I'll never make it back scene.
Bye.
By the priest who's lost his faith.
Yeah.
But you see, there was loads of them in the 70s, wasn't there? You had Poseidon. You also had Earthquake.
Allen.
Do you remember Earthquake?
Yeah.
Earthquake Sense Around brought a new surround system into cinemas using subwoofers and so on. Thankfully, I was too young to experience that. I watched it on the TV. But yeah, you had Earthquake. You also had, what was the one with the Tower in Inferno?
Tower in Inferno.
Not really a natural disaster, but
that's a magnificent film, though.
Yeah,
it's a
magnificent.
great film.
A lot of these films had exclamation marks as well, I seem to remember, particularly on the poster.
Yeah.
Can I do
Earthquake, exclamation mark.
Yeah.
A very narrow, small focus piece of weather disaster movie with a bit of twisted stuff going to it. I thoroughly enjoy Hard Rain to this day, mainly because it's just ridiculous, but it's lovely and ridiculous, and it's got Morgan Freeman wandering around being Morgan Freeman, and it's I love it.
Does Freeman play the villain?
Yes, he does.
Which is unusual.
Yes. But he's a villain who's been hard done to. It's fair that he's a villain, you see.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's part of his contract or something, but
You see, we're all rattling on here, but quietly in the background, Mark hasn't said a word yet. But Mark's just going to come out with something that is just going to knock everybody else's suggestions out of the park.
What about Snowpiercer? Oh, sorry. Sorry, Mark. Yeah.
That was a good ventriloquism.
You see where he's got his hand.
No, I'm going to be totally honest here and say I really don't like natural disaster and storm-based films.
Ooh.
I don't like Twister. I'm sorry.
Thanks for joining us, Mark. Speak to you next week.
No, I have no soft spot for stuff like Hard Rain. It just, I don't know. I kind of don't really care.
It's fair.
It's just one of those things. Like with the Towering Inferno. Is anyone really that bothered? I don't know. But I do like, if we're talking those storm-based, where it's used as the setup for something. So stuff like Identity, or almost like the Hateful Eight, that kind of thing, where it pins people into a given location. That I like. If I'm going to choose one, then it'll be the Wizard of Oz or Sharknado.
Go big or go home, in other words.
I'm going to have to put one in here for The Rock with San Andreas, which is a guilty pleasure of mine.
Everything involving The Rock is no longer a guilty pleasure for you, Steve. It's simply
just a pleasure.
Yes. Yeah, but morally, he really, he's using government-funded aircraft for his own personal use.
No. It's a story of one man's utter dereliction of duty. But that's probably not one for the movie poster, is it?
Cracking Atmos soundtrack as well.
Yeah, amazing Atmos soundtrack.
They're making another one, aren't they?
They're going to blow up LA, going to destroy LA again.
I don't know. They're only going to do something, but yeah, they're going to have another. another situation where he'll just ignore everybody to save his family.
Roland Emmerich's probably the king of this sort of stuff these days, isn't it? Or he used to be, rather, with 2012 and The Day After Tomorrow.
Gash, yeah, I had my money on Ed saying Day After Tomorrow.
Well, I don't know. Day After Tomorrow is so weathery, it tilts over into an apocalypse, doesn't it? Because we discussed it last time round. I mean, let's face it, it does profoundly change. I
just see that film as your Blue Whale. You know, Alan Davies' Blue Whale. That's what I see that film as.
I thoroughly enjoy it. It's just you can't watch it in the summer. That's the thing. I mean, to be honest, it's a whole. This is possibly going to reveal more of my relevant personality disorders than you already know. But there are certain media, both music and film. There are some albums I cannot listen to in the winter, and others that I cannot listen to in the summer. And there are certain things with film. The idea of watching The Day After Tomorrow on a hot, sunny day is utterly ridiculous. I couldn't do it. It just doesn't work. And I know you're going to say, well, I'm in a darkened theatre room, whatever. No, I know, and it doesn't work.
I do. I completely agree. I will tend to only watch The Thing in winter. It doesn't work in summer.
Definitely. I completely agree. I'm glad that I'm not as profoundly mental as I was fearing there, or at least there's another person as nearly as mental as me. It's like the original Fleet Foxes album, the one titled Fleet Foxes, has to be listened to in the winter. I mean, I've got a beautiful, minty, fresh first pressing on vinyl. It only gets played for about 4 months a year. Just don't ask me why. It's an album for the winter. So yeah, The Day After Tomorrow is exactly that. It has to be a grotty, usually sort of November sort of, pissing down with rain sort of day. Then it's great to watch. Brilliant. And one of the things that makes that work more than anything special effects. I mean, 2012 had a number of things wrong with it. John Cusack was not suitable to be in a central position in a disaster movie. I like John Cusack. He's been in many great films. He's not really suitable for that. Dennis Quaid, on the other hand, perfect for disaster films. It's about finding your right leading actor / actress to make it work. And
in the 70s, that would have been Charlton Heston.
Yes, absolutely. And much as we agree that The Rock his actions in San Andreas are morally questionable when viewed in a wider perspective. Again, he sort of works in a disaster movie context, although he still managed to make a bit of a fist of Skyscraper. So he's not perfect. But no, I agree.
I think if you want to go for realistic disaster movies, The Impossible's pretty tough watch.
It's incredibly depressing, isn't it?
Yeah. I quite enjoyed Pompeii.
I've watched it. I don't know whether enjoy is a strike. It's just got Jon Snow wandering around in a skiff.
I don't get it. We're getting dangerously close to. I suppose that's the same as volcanoes, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very
it's a volcano.
I do. Again, I sort of quite like it, despite being terrible. Sylvester Stallone in Daylight.
Yes.
Well, they're in a tunnel, aren't they? Isn't it?
Yeah, they are in a tunnel. Yeah, I got time for Daylight. Yeah.
I mean, it's questionable whether it's a natural disaster because I believe that it's a man-made explosion that causes it, but it's still people versus the inevitability of nature, and it's got Sylvester Stallone in it.
Yeah, cliffhanger days, can't beat those.
Absolutely. I haven't watched that in donkey's years, though. And it's 24 years old, just to make you feel old.
Well, Cliffhanger or Daylight?
Daylight. I watched Cliffhanger, surprisingly, recently, because it crops up on Now TV.
That's a phenomenal piece of TV.
With the bloke from EastEnders.
Yeah.
Yeah, Craig Fairbrass.
Yeah.
Yes, he's an advert for football, isn't he?
Yeah.
So he's calling it soccer,
up. Yeah,
which nobody in English would ever say.
So ridiculous.
12-yard death strike.
Yeah. And the crowd goes wild.
Super bonus multi-ball.
Yeah.
To be honest, if we introduce that into modern football, instead of extra time, super bonus multi-ball would be fantastic. Absolutely adore that. So if you are listening and you run the Premier League, go for it. I've just looked through the other things at the Google list. There's a lot of. It does appear that B movies. I mean, it's interesting. It's listing The Core as a natural disaster movie, which I suppose it is.
Yeah, it is.
Although it's mankind stopping the core, which is still. But I mean, I love that film. I mean, it's got everything. It's got unobtainium. It's got people chewing the scenery. It's got that random Canadian bloke that
Cario getting crushed inside one of the carriages in order to save some kind of
it's got that random Canadian guy who dies in every film he's in. It's fun. It's good. Yeah. I like the call.
Yeah,
and then in the middle of it, it's got Hilary Swank looking sort of confused.
Post Oscar. I need to
have
like with my agent.
Kind of material that they've got to keep going at a certain speed, and then it'll drill through anything. But if they don't, obviously unobtainium. Yeah, that's phenomenal. If we're going wild though, then you're going to bring in other things like sunshine and stuff like that. If we're talking about natural disasters like the core shutting down, isn't that why they have
talked about sunshine last week, and once again that Mark Strong is even when he's a hideously disfigured lunatic, he's still very sexy.
I didn't realise there was as many Twister movies.
Are you looking at, like me, at the list and wondering if Atomic Tornado is somehow worth a view?
Yeah, well, you got Twister 2 Extreme Tornado, Tornado Alley, Fire Twister, Horse Whisperer meets Twister, Christmas Twister,
Titty Twister. Oh, that's a bar.
No, that's a bar. Yeah, and on that, I think that's enough for this week. I think we've run ourselves into the ground once again.
Weather for one night.
Yeah. So my thanks to Ed Selley.
Son, you've got a problem.
Kaz Harlow.
I got a woman who I can't stand to be 2 feet away from.
Steve Withers.
The Flemish Cap went there once.
And he turned up late, Mark Botwright.
Big dump ducks and green-legged coots.
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Bookmark AVForums.com for latest reviews, news and video. Plus, why not leave us a 5-star rating on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. Also, head over and check out our YouTube channel for videos on the latest product launches and reviews. And while you're there, feel free to subscribe. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for watching and listening even, and we'll see you again next week.